individual will kill and he will rape. He will do anything he can to cause harm. So please be aware of your surroundings.
A rising star in the tech industry, honored by Forbes at the young age of just 26, had her life cut short. And now police have apprehended the person who they suspect brutally killed her. Master criminal investigator Dr. Troy Looney comes on to give his insight into the case. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Let's go over to Baltimore, Maryland, where 26-year-old Pavel Lapierre, the co-founder of a startup called EcoMap Technologies that connected companies and investors, was tragically killed. We're talking about the loss of a young woman who was in the prime of her life. Lapierre was named on this year's Forbes 30 Under 30 list for social impact, and at only 26 years of age, she was well on her way to becoming a titan in the industry.
I had my life entirely mapped out, a blueprint for how I was going to make a change in the world.
So now let's give you a timeline of what we think happened here. So she was reported missing on Monday, September 25th. Her body was found just hours after that, with reports suggesting that she was found on the roof of her Baltimore apartment building. And while a cause of death hasn't been officially confirmed, authorities did say that her body sustained blunt force trauma, and it seems that she was also partially clothed. So who would have done this? Well, authorities have announced that they have just arrested their prime suspect, 32-year-old Jason Billingsley. He was arrested at a train station about 30 miles away from Baltimore. We know that SWAT officers arrested him without incident. He was wanted on several charges and is now charged with first-degree murder, assault, reckless endangerment, all in connection with Lapierre's death. He is a violent offender, arrested multiple times dating back to 2009 when he pled guilty to first-degree assault. He was put on 2 years supervised release, but was convicted in 2011 for second-degree assault and sentenced to 2 years in prison. But then in 2013, only months after being released from prison, he strikes again. And he's arrested for what is being reported as an attempted rape. He pleads guilty in 2015 and is sentenced to 30 years in prison. However, all but 14 years, some outlets saying 16 years, were suspended, and he was released after serving 7 years, not on parole, but on something called good time credits. Released on October 2022 on mandatory supervision, he's listed under the Maryland Sex Offender Registry in the most serious classification. Billingsley is also now charged with another brutal attack on a man and a woman in Baltimore just days before Lapierre was killed. The woman was tied up and raped. Her neck was cut. Their home was set on fire. They both survived, thankfully, but they had to go to the hospital, and so did their 5-year-old for smoke inhalation. Now, police say they knew that Billingsley was the suspect in that attack, but they say it was targeted, so they didn't think that Billingsley would go on to commit more random attacks against people. That is possibly why the police didn't publicize his warrant, but unfortunately, he is now believed to be behind Pavel Lapierre's murder.
In reference to the homicide of Ms. Lapierre, we are still processing all evidence to determine exactly what occurred. We do know that there was no forced entry in the apartment building, as this was a secure building. We don't know if there were any connections previously to Mr. Billingsley. This is what we will continue to investigate, as well as the incident on Evans Avenue. I want to be very clear that in reference to both incidents and throughout these investigations, all information that was provided was based on preliminary details available at the time. Every BPD officer received notification of the warrant on September 20th, and they were aggressively trying to capture the individual and to locate his whereabouts and take him into custody. Since then, he has been continued to be our #1 priority until his capture last night. Our WATF task force, as well as the U.S. Marshals, started to track him on September 20th, and we tracked him all the way until we captured him yesterday.
Meanwhile, Lapierre's family, friends, and colleagues are mourning her death that really just came out of nowhere. Baltimore's Mayor Brandon Scott spoke about the loss during an earlier news conference.
Pavel was a very young, talented, devoted Baltimorean, someone that I had the opportunity to get to know over the past few years, who would help anybody that she would see. And to have that life cut short by someone who has no care about anything other than harming people is something that should sit deep in the stomachs of all Baltimoreans tonight.
And in a statement to Law and Crime, her father, Frank LaPere, said, quote, Pava has been an inspiration to so many people. She was driven, creative, hardworking, and relentless in her efforts. With her wonderful team at EcoMap Technologies, Pava made an impact in every endeavor she undertook and on every life she touched. She will be forever missed as a daughter, sister, granddaughter, niece, cousin, and loyal friend. We hope to be able to provide more information in the near future, and we appreciate your understanding that privacy at this time is our top priority. So there are a lot of unanswered questions at this point. How did police narrow down Billingsley as the suspect? What is the motive? Was there any connection between Billingsley and LaPere? More information about could he have been arrested sooner? Why was he out to begin with? Well, I'm joined right now by Dr. Troy Looney, a certified master criminal investigator and detective with the Akron Police Department, and also Law and Crime Network's nominee for America's Greatest Detective. Detective Looney, it was great to see you this past weekend at CrimeCon at the Clue Awards. You were one of our nominees. I got a chance to meet you, and what a pleasure it was.
Yes, thank you. Pleasure meeting you all as well. Thank you for the nomination. That was amazing. Amazing time there at CrimeCon.
Yeah, no,
So
it was a great time. A lot of recognition for Sidebar, a lot of recognition for you. So it was a great time all around, and very well deserved. So I wish we were meeting. Yeah, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances, because this is an incredibly sad and tragic case. Before we even get into the investigation and the law, what are just your overall thoughts on this?
Again, a tragic crime, tragic incident that unfortunately happened. My initial thoughts were looking at the details that have been reported, at least up till now. What happened, looking at such a prominent young lady in her prime, and really basically that has achieved so much in such a short time, and what happened. So my first thought was location, understanding details that had been released. I understand there was a missing persons call that took place before she was discovered there. And this is a 7-story building. It's my understanding she lived at the luxury apartment at the top, lived and worked out of that location. So just trying to put some ideas together of reason why this happened, motive for it happening. Was there any relation or connections, or any other potential persons of interest? Also, relationship, if any at all. Maybe there was no connection at all. I believe that's what's known up to this point in time. So just considering who made the missing persons call, what the timeline was of both parties, the victim and perpetrator, and just trying to put the details together. I know law enforcement is not allowed to disclose everything because they have to keep the integrity of the case intact until they can complete their investigation. So that's a part of what we all probably are wondering: what took place and why.
So let's talk about the arrest, because that's the latest information. Police had a press conference upon the arrest of Jason Dean Billingsley, 32 years old. He was arrested late Wednesday, charged with first-degree murder, assault, reckless endangerment, all in connection to LaPere's death. And what's really interesting is he's arrested 2 days after she's found, which you would say great police work. But I want to start with the most controversial aspect of this case so far, is that apparently a warrant was out for his arrest for a different crime that happened before LaPere's death, a rape and arson incident. There was a warrant out for his arrest for this. This is something that left, he had tied 2 people up. He allegedly raped one of these people, set them on fire. They both survived. Really brutal case. And in this house, there was a 5-year-old that had smoke inhalation and had to be taken to the hospital. So there was a warrant out for his arrest, but they said that this attack was targeted, so they had no indication that he was going to commit more crimes, and that is why they didn't publicize the warrant before LaPere was killed. Are you bothered by that?
In the sense of, I wouldn't say necessarily bothered. I guess there's a concern, obviously, but working from the law enforcement side, the media always wants to know, what's going on, what details do you have, what can you tell us? But in speaking to, the case integrity, it's imperative for law enforcement to first and foremost identify what happened, understand who all is involved, who's responsible, and then what evidence can lead to 100%, or at least a definitive answer of who's responsible, what can be proven also and what has to be disclosed or protected for the integrity of the case. Obviously, they cannot always share details. We're actively tracking this person by these means. We know who it is by surveillance or witnesses. You also have to protect the witnesses involved as well. So a lot of factors come in. And we love to disclose everything initially, but that will jeopardize the case potentially. So it is of concern to know, but that kind of makes sense. They kind of gave some clues as to he's a person of interest in the crime that occurred, the break-in, rape, and everything else, and fire arson. So that does leave some idea of, or maybe the questions of, what is the motive? Was the second attack also targeted, or what's the means behind that?
But even putting that to the side, this is somebody, there was a
Okay.
warrant, apparently. I mean, the way I'm understanding it, a warrant out for his arrest for a violent crime against two individuals. You would think they would
Yes.
want to publicize that, make sure that he is caught immediately, because even if that was a targeted attack in their estimation, he could still be
Yes.
out there and he's a danger. So I guess I'm just curious, could this have been prevented? Could they, if he did kill LePere, if it was publicized, and could he have been apprehended sooner?
Right. Yes, Jesse, I do understand, and that's an excellent questions to consider because several factors, not just the incident. That's bad enough in itself. The previous incident having an active warrant, but also um, even the release of Billingsley it's in itself. So a lot of things to consider and further discussion. But should he have even been released from prison on parole with his
Right.
past? He's a repeat violent offender. He had prior sexual assaults, sentenced to 30 years, only served 14 years, well, actually 9 years, 3 months of the 14. So a lot of things to consider, but that is a concern. I'm sure the public will weigh in on that as well.
And we're going to get into his past in a second, but I want to focus on the killing of Pavel Lepere. So
Okay.
investigators have indicated that they believe she was killed on a Friday night, and her body wasn't found until Monday morning. This was only a couple of
Okay.
hours after she was reported missing. That
Yes.
timeline, and again, they haven't, as far as I can tell, officially confirmed that her body was found on the roof of her apartment building. But the fact that they believe she was killed, on a Friday night and she wasn't found until Monday, what does that tell you?
Okay, so what stands out to me there, that tells me that a couple things. Obviously, with the pathology and the medical examination or autopsy, timeline will be determined as far as time maybe for temperature and other factors that scientifically can definitively say we know this to be true, maybe extent of injuries and or the entire examination that will take place. Also, other factors and other evidences such as video surveillance, tracking capabilities for devices and or social media and what have you. All that factors into the evidence. The scene itself, the building was secured there. So by what methods of entry were gained? Was it by external fire escape? The fact that she lived on the seventh floor, so this was like a luxury
And,
penthouse suite.
and let me add to that, they have indicated there was no forced entry.
Okay, yes. So that means the building was secured. So there are other questions. Was there some connection unknown, or was it also a targeted effort because she was prominent and lived and worked at the home home office, and luxury apartment? So things that also stand out are what's the motive? We do know the mother had reported seeing him with a gun maybe a day before the attack was identified or somewhere in close proximity, and he was trying to sell this weapon. So was he trying to gain some kind of financial um, monies or monetary to plan his exit or to leave town? So he already knew he was on the run. If he's in fact the person that did this, having the active warrant, he was already planning his escape and planning to leave the location. Also, obviously, him being caught at the train station, he was trying to get out of town and
Yeah,
avoid capture.
let's talk about that. And then we'll go back to the crime scene. So apparently they pick
Okay.
him up at night at this Mark train station on Laurel Bowie Road in Bowie, Prince George's County. It's in Maryland. I think it's 30 miles away from Baltimore. He wasn't out of the
Yes.
state, right? But it looks like he
Yes.
was trying to escape.
That's absolutely right. So him being at the train station is an indicator. He knew obviously after media had reported active warrants for the LaPere killing or crime that occurred. So he knew of that warrant. Still, he also knew he was a person of interest in the other crime that occurred with the assault, arsons, and so forth. So he actually sent text messages reported by his mother. He sent text messages between the two saying he was, she urged him to turn himself in, but she was concerned for his safety, obviously, and wanting him to be just, come forward.
It's look, it's hard to make sense of any of these crimes, but if he is
Yes.
guilty of all of this, what I don't understand is if he attacks two people in a very violent crime, why would he go out of his way to then kill another individual? Why wouldn't he just try to run out of there? Why wouldn't he try to leave town as soon as possible? Why kill another individual? Because again, right now they don't have any connections between Billingsley and LaPere. So it's a question of why he would have done that.
Absolutely. Yeah. The question is always why. We don't always understand, or we may never learn the motive or intent. It would be interesting his interview if he chooses to speak as to what took place and or request a lawyer. But the interview would be significant in understanding maybe some factors, his mental capacity, what he's been dealing with, what his focus may be or have been, the reason for him trying to have to gain money or sell this weapon for whatever reason. Maybe it was because he wanted to get rid of the evidence that he had used previously, or maybe there's other crimes committed with that. But it does bring to light, what's the reason for these incidents that took place and these killings.
And we're speculating a lot because we don't have information. I think the reporting indicates
Absolutely.
that with respect to the arson attack, he had, made himself look like as a maintenance worker to gain access to the building.
Okay.
I don't know if that was something similar that happened with LaPere's building. And also, if it's true that her body was found on the roof, which I feel is an odd place for the body to be found. Not sure if she was killed there or the body was moved there. But does that tell you anything about what might have happened?
Yes, actually, what that may indicate, and of course, it's media reporting, so they may have used the term roof, but that being this, it's a 7-story building from a photo that was shared, and if she lived at the top penthouse suite, that just may be the top floor. So if that is in fact her residence and workplace, that is the top floor. So essentially, it could be
Hmm.
considered the roof, but it does factor into what was the position, how was she found, where she was found. Is there other evidence and clues to show, was there a struggle that ensued or some attempt of defense? So that'll all factor in also with the autopsy and examination.
They haven't officially, as far as I can tell, at this point, confirmed what the cause of death is. They have said that she sustained blunt force trauma. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so my understanding of blunt force trauma is it's when a physical injury or trauma has taken place to the body by way of falling, an impact, or by an attack. Essentially, there's commonly severe blood loss in that case, and also the severity depends on the extent of injuries and/or by what mechanism the blunt force was delivered.
And um, it seems again, and I'm going to go into his history in a minute about what he's accused of doing in the past, or I should say, not even accused, what he was found guilty of,
Okay.
assaults and sexual related crimes. It would seem to be if he did do this to Miss LaPere, it is consistent with that behavior. But before we even get into that, as I said, there appears to be no connection at this point between Billingsley and LaPere. If this was just a random act of violence, how is that uncommon given what we're seeing here, or is that to be expected given Billingsley's past?
Yeah, so essentially, again, it's going to depend on the mental, I guess, culpability of the individual. What was he dealing with? We can look at this in maybe the suggestion of a crime of opportunity, whereas he was desperate to get out of town to acquire monies and/or objects to sell. So we know that it was reported he broke into the first incident to that residence location where he tied the people up and assaulted them. This may have just been a break-in by opportunity of
Right.
the external fire escape and or posing as a maintenance individual to get some items to sell.
It's horrifying to think
It is.
about.
It's terrible.
It's really terrible, and we're trying to make sense of it. Thank goodness he was arrested and apprehended 2 days after
Absolutely.
this. I mean, that's really great police work. We don't know exactly how they identified him in the first place. Do you have any theories about that?
So again, it's going to come back to the evidence that has been uncovered or discovered, actually. So it could be video surveillance. There could be eyewitnesses that have identified seeing him at the location or near the location, or leaving the location also. So there'll be a lot of forensic investigations and testing, DNA potentially, forensic evidence. Again, video surveillance, maybe even audio. So contingent upon, the timeline of how things took place, how things happened, what investigators are looking at, and that'll be extensive as far as interviews with coworkers, family, friends, relatives, and neighbors even.
And you think they're talking with him right now, or they're trying to get him to talk, unless he's lawyered up?
Well, that depends. I'm sure initially when you make the initial apprehension, they're transported to a facility, and they should conduct an interview with him almost immediately, just to while it's in play. So the
I,
arrest is in play, actually.
I got to ask you the big question. It's the question that a lot of
Okay.
people are talking about with respect to Jason Billingsley. How on earth was he out to do this? Because I mentioned his past. He was
Okay.
sentenced to 30 years in prison in 2015, and all but 14 years, I think there's been reporting 16 years, but 14 years was
Yes.
suspended. And then he gets out in October 2022, not on parole, but on something called good credits. Walk us through how this is possible.
Okay, so my understanding, what's been reported, yes, he was sentenced to 30 years for his previous violent crimes and also sexual offenses that took place. A 30-year sentence issued by the judge, and that judge didn't feel that was enough time. So essentially, how this happened, is my understanding, is there was a plea deal that was offered and accepted to suspend 16 of those 30 years from his sentence. So, still serving or facing 14 years, he began his sentence and served 9 years and 3 months of his 14-year sentence. The good credits that you mentioned is a part of the Maryland legislation and legislative laws in place to reduce the prison population. So these good credits could be work related inside the prison, educational, other jobs they can potentially do to work days off from their sentencing. And I believe he was actually denied parole in 2020, denied parole in 2022 earlier, and it became a mandatory release after he accumulated enough credits to have served his complete sentence. I did look at the law briefly, and it mentioned very specifically a violent crime or crime of a violent nature, um, with a sexual offense, but the person or individual will be 16 years or younger. So that could be revisited, or maybe should be potentially revisited for amendment. There's no perfect way, and know this. Everyone has rights, of course, we understand that. But with that factoring in, there are 38 states that have these laws in place already. There are 4 that are not in agreement. So the 38 states have the laws for good behavior credits towards reducing prison time and the time they're served or they've received.
It's just shocking that he was even eligible for the good credits given his past. Now, I should tell you that the Baltimore
Yes.
mayor, Brandon Scott, has criticized Billingsley being released and said, quite frankly, he shouldn't have been on the he said, quite frankly, he shouldn't have been out on the streets in the first place. We also know that the circuit judge, Emmanuel Brown, who presided over this deal, didn't agree with
Yes,
it.
that's
Apparently said
correct.
this is
Yes.
not under the guidelines of 15 to 25 years. Said, quote, this case deserves a lot more than the 14, meaning the 14 suspended years. And apparently, I think there was a sign off on this deal because it would have allowed the survivor of this sexual assault to not have to testify at trial, which you and I both know is a very traumatic experience. It could be very painful. So sometimes if a
Absolutely.
deal can be worked out, it could be the best thing for all parties. But at the end of the day, if he gets out early and attacks multiple people, attempted
Yes.
murder of 2, kills another,
Yes.
what
Yes.
happened here?
Exactly. Yes. So that has to be explored and discussed further. again, maybe to revisit some of the good credit behavior legislation in place. Again, he's a repeat violent offender, as reported, served time, and was issued that 30-year sentence for the very reason, the violent sexual assault. So yeah, there are a lot of questions to be answered, or at least discussed.
And I should tell you that the Baltimore City State's attorney, Ivan Bates, said at this press conference after the arrest of Billingsley that if Billingsley is found guilty of these most serious crimes, they're going to seek life in prison without the possibility of parole. He said, quote, "This individual will never get out to see the light of day again." And I think that given these allegations, and obviously he is innocent under the law until proven guilty, but given these allegations and given what he's charged with, I mean, it's pretty horrendous. I'll give you the final word on it.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Unfortunately, this happened, and we don't always know why again, but hopefully we can have some sort of understanding or better details as they complete their investigation or continue their investigation.
It's just a shame. It's a really, really horrifying series of events. 2 people brutally attacked, and now we have the loss of a life. I said it before, say it again. She was in the prime of her life. There's going to be a titan in the industry. Just should not have happened. Really sad to think about. And we're going to continue to monitor this story as it progresses. But Dr. Looney, Detective Looney, great to see you once again. Thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. We really appreciate it.
You too, Jesse. Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone else. I really appreciate the time, and thank you. It's a tragic case, but we can more details to come, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, sir.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.